Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the JW Free Podcast. My name is James. I am your host. And today I am probably more excited than ever because of the conversation we're going to have today. So you guys come on in and pull up a chair and get warm. I know it's cold outside. And let's get warmed up to this conversation we're about to have. You guys know over the last year, I tried my best to give you supporting evidence on why the Jehovah's Witness organization is a harmful and very destructive organization, because it's easy to make claims without any basis. And so today I'm going to give you an additional angle to look at with my guest today. He does an excellent job in explaining concepts, and he does a great job of doing that for you guys. And he also has a heavy social media presence as well as YouTube. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Matt. He is a former Jehovah's Witness elder, and my favorite part, a current EXJW activist. Matt, how are you, man?
Doing well, James. Thank you for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
You got it, man. I want to get right into it and ask you, how were you first introduced to the Jehovah's Witness organization?
So I don't have the very traditional story of most Jehovah's Witnesses. What happened was my grandmother learned about the organization in the 1960s. She was eventually baptized in 1970. And by way of that, two of her children, two of my aunts were baptized later on in the 80s. And because my mother and I lived with my grandmother, I was around my Jehovah's Witness family. We, out of respect to my grandmother, we used to go to the memorials and, went to meetings here and there. And by way of my aunts, my cousins, my grandmother, I started coming to the Kingdom Hall with them at the age of 12. And it was something that I kind of latched onto. I felt like it was a good environment, and my mother was okay with me coming to the Kingdom Hall. So it became something that I regularly participated in.
Got it. So kind of by default, pretty much.
Right.
Okay. So, well, then let's fast forward then. What was appealing to you as you got older and you were spending time in the organization? What was appealing to you about becoming an elder? I'm assuming you went from ministerial servant to elder. So what was appealing to you about that?
Well, I always wanted to help people. That was like my thing. Even when I was a small child, before I had really gone into the Jehovah's Witness world, I wanted to be a lawyer and a politician. I always wanted to do something where I could help society. Even though, of course, like any other child, I had my selfish longings. I wanted to be a professional athlete and, famous, things like that. But I still wanted to use that as a way to help people. And I saw being a appointed man in the congregation, as they call it, as a better avenue to help people. As I learned the Jehovah's Witness version of the Bible, I came to believe that, everything in the world was refuse, as they say. And so I said, all right, politics and these things of the world, I can't help people that way. But I can help people in the congregation. I can help people by being a regular pioneer in the neighborhood. And so that's what really motivated me more than anything.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you're a humanitarian hiding in the Kingdom Hall.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, with that being said, you're realizing that you want to help and you want to do all these wonderful things, right? How did that contrast with what you started finding out about the organization as an elder?
Yeah, that was it was a huge contrast because, when you're a teenager coming up in the congregation, you tend to look up to some of these brothers and you think, wow, they're doing a great job. They're really giving their all to help people in the congregation. And then when you get a look behind the curtain and you get to see the egos and the selfishness, it really is like how some people say, you get to see how the sausage is made. It truly is that kind of feeling, because the level of disgust that I had so many times, I mean, there were days where I honestly prayed, I said, Jehovah, please just dissolve our congregation, because these brothers got to go. It was absolutely, like, there were times, when I first became an elder, where I honestly couldn't understand what was going on. I was like, man, Jehovah, let these brothers do anything, you know?
Let them loose, huh? With that being said, right, at what point are you sitting at home after you've prayed to Jehovah and you didn't kind of get what you were looking for? What you're sitting at home saying, what am I going to do? When did your awakening start happening?
That's a good question. So I'd say my awakening happened kind of slowly over a few years. Um, I always had doubts and questions, like any person reasonably does, but nothing that was too strong until around 2015. That was the first time when I had heard about the issues with child sexual abuse in the organization. And I had read some articles here and there from newspapers and magazines. And of course, I was still suffering from that cognitive dissonance. I didn't want to believe anything that was being said negatively against the organization. But, it did startle me, of course. But I kind of put that on the back burner. And then as the years went by, 2016, 2017, there were more doubts cropping up here and there. And of course, as I mentioned, dealing with the brothers in the congregation, I just felt like there was no Holy Spirit at all going on in the congregation. So the doubts started to get louder and louder and louder, to the point that I found myself, just not praying at all, not taking meeting preparation seriously at all. And my wife comments on it now that, she noticed a big change in the way that I talked about things. I started to question things more openly at home. I didn't make family study a priority. I didn't really care too much for it. And I guess I didn't realize how much I was making it obvious, but my poker face was coming down.
Yeah.
And I just, I started to question things a lot because things stopped making sense to me.
Yeah. So you got a couple of years of doubt happening, right? And so it sounds like your wife was supportive of you.
Oh, absolutely. My wife actually woke up years before me. She just, she tried not to give it away.
Yeah.
She wanted to let me figure things out on my own, which I did eventually. But I'd say my wife was awake from about 2015.
Okay.
And so she, her awakening happened for different reasons than I. But once she kind of realized that things weren't making sense, she had a big change in how she felt about the organization. I could tell, but I'm trying to be a good head, as they call it, and I tried to motivate her and I tried to say and do the right things. But eventually, once I reached to the state of full doubt, and we were able to talk about it freely, she was like, oh, well, I'm glad you realized that it doesn't make sense, because I knew this for a while now.
Yeah. Well, that's good, man, that it worked out that way. As you know, a lot of people, it doesn't work out that way and they have to lose a lot. So I'm glad that worked out. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, the child sex abuse cases, if you're all right with that. While you were serving as an elder, did you come across any of these types of things that you guys had to actively deal with?
So, interestingly enough, I only came across one case while I was an elder, and it was actually after I had already woken up. So I was PMO at that point. This was, I want to say, maybe 5 or 6 weeks before I actually disassociated. But what happened was, there was a brother in our congregation who was originally from Guyana, South America. And he had molested his wife's sister. And she was, I want to say, like a preteen, like 12 or 13. And it was known in the congregation that they were in Guyana, South America. And for whatever reason, that information just didn't reach us in New York City. So when the information did finally get to us, they told us, I remember we got an email, the whole elder body, and we discussed it at an elders meeting, and basically they said, the situation was handled, but basically just let parents of small children in the congregation know that this guy is basically not to be trusted. And that was silly, to say the least, because the congregation was primarily an elderly congregation. The only people in the congregation who had children was my wife and I and one other sister. So effectively, they said, all right, there's nothing to be done here, which doesn't actually make sense in application because, sure, there's only 2 families with children in the congregation, but this man is going door to door, knocking on people's doors, and those people have children, and he also has 3 children of his own. Yeah. So it really was disheartening, but because I was already awake to the fact that the Jehovah's Witness doctrine wasn't real, and so much of what I thought was true wasn't real, it was just another bit of frustration that was added on my plate at the time.
Sure. You know what's amazing to you? See me shaking my head here because I'm 45. I don't know how old you are. But for me, at some point in your life, 35, 40 years of age, you start to realize these are the things I should be doing and these are the things I shouldn't be doing. So I always wonder, my dad was residing overseer, and I hope that he wasn't involved in any of that. But I always wonder how you can force yourself, to follow along with those decisions, which brings me to my next question about the 2-witness rule. What is the theory behind that? Because I have my own, because for me, it's, what's the odds of there being 2 people or more than the parties present? You know what I mean? But kind of give me your thoughts on that.
That's actually really good. So before I answer that, just a little background. So I was appointed as an elder by the man most famously known for that, we will never change the 2-witness rule, Gary Bro, helper to the governing body. If you've seen, EXJW content, he's one of those people that is well known because there's that clip of him doing a morning worship program where he says, we will never change the 2-witness rule. Wow. And so when I was appointed as an elder, I remember, they brought me in the back room and they said, are you prepared to serve as an elder? I said, yes. And then they asked, have you ever committed or been a victim of child sexual abuse? And I was like, totally thrown off by that question. I was like, whoa, no, absolutely not. So they ask, okay, so they say, okay, you'll be appointed as an elder. It'll be announced at the meeting. Do you have any questions? So naturally, my question was, yeah, what's up with that question about? And Gary Bro, he says, well, it's for legal purposes. And at the time, I didn't have the mind to compute it because, I'm excited. I got appointed as an elder, but thinking back on it, it's like, wow, that was a bit cryptic, that the same guy that, has this audio clip where he says, we will never change the 2-witness rule, was the guy that asked me, wow, these questions. So when it comes to the 2-witness rule, I actually think it's just as simple as Brother Bro told me. I think it's for legal reasons. Because when you compare the Jehovah's Witnesses to any other religious organization or even other secular organizations like the Boy Scouts, who have had these issues with child sexual abuse, their biggest concern is always legality and money. Whether it be the Catholic Church or Southern Baptists, the Boy Scouts, numerous universities, it seems like their number one goal is always protect the money. Yeah. And I think that's exactly why the Jehovah's Witnesses do it. Now, they may use